Good evening, and I would like to welcome you to the second edition of Punjab Security Matters. Our focus today is on the drivers of radicalization, and our eminent guests include Professor Pramod Kumar, the Director of the Institute for Development and Communication, Chandigarh. Professor Kumar chaired the commissions on governance reforms for the states of Punjab and of Haryana. His work focuses on the politics of development for conflict management and resolution, on citizen social security and safety nets, and on the practice of democracy through empirical analysis of public policy. He was the recipient of the prestigious Homi Bhabha Award for the year 1988-90. Professor Jagrup Singh Sekhon served as the professor of political science at the Guru Nanak Dev University. His work focuses on socio-political movements in Punjab, including terrorist violence, election studies, border area studies, and farmers' issues, among others. He is one of the authors of Terrorism in Punjab, Understanding Grassroots Realities, the only empirical study of Khalistani terrorism based on interviews of 323 terrorists, as well as of many others who influenced or were impacted by the movement of armed violence that plagued Punjab for a decade and a half. We're going to talk today on the growth of religious radicalization, globally, of course, also nationally, and within Punjab. We see this as an increasing and manifest reality. Within Punjab, the Khalistan movement has periodically reminded us of its existence through occasional acts of terrorism, as well as reports of arrests, seizures of weapons, and a range of subversive and propaganda activities. Very importantly, we had almost 8 years without a Khalistan-linked fatality right up to 2015. Since 2016 onwards, there has been at least one fatality every year linked to Khalistani terrorism thereafter. There is also a rising flood of Khalistani propaganda, particularly on social media, and indications that the idea of Khalistan is once again finding at least some resonance among the youth, particularly in the Sikh diaspora communities, but also in some small measure within Punjab. I would like to start with Professor Sekhon and ask him at the grassroots level, Professor, do you see a significant rise of radicalization or Khalistani sentiment in the larger population in Punjab? Or is this so much of what we see nowadays, a drumming up of small things to larger and larger levels? For political objectives or a distortion of reality?
Good evening, sir. Yeah. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to talk on this very important issue, which is very dear to all of us. We are all very much concerned about the issue which you have talked about. That I will start with a small, basically, a statement. Yesterday you said. It is a very mild statement in that way also.
Please.
We have seen that in Punjab for the last more than 1.5 years, we have a very powerful peasants movement in the state, and there is a large-scale mobilization of the people for that movement. And on the borders of the Delhi, you've seen the parallel discourse was going on. On the one side, you have the peasants who had allegiance to what we see is the left ideology. But side by side, though it was not very much visible, but such instances were there where we could see that the people are being mobilized on what is called the religious issue, or what we see is that making this secular issue, the peasants issue of the peasants, Sikh peasants over there.
If I may interrupt you just momentarily, sir, do you take this as something that has only started with the peasants movement or the farmers movement, or does it actually proceed for several years, the farmers movement?
Yes, sir, the point which I want to say is that when this issue was resolved, the central government had withdrawn that the 3 laws, and the farmers started coming back from the borders. We were one of the most powerful and the big organizations of the peasants, that is of the VKU Graham. That then when the press reporters asked him this question, Okay, what was the major problems you faced here while sitting on the borders of the Delhi? They were thinking that they will say that because of the non-response of the government, because of that much of a summer and all these things in that way also, which we all see that okay, they suffered a lot because of the vagaries of this climates over there. But his response was very candid. He said nothing doing in that way also. ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਖੱਜਲ ਖਰਾਬੀ ਹੋਈ ਆ ਉਹ ਖਾਲਿਸਤਾਨੀਆਂ ਤੋਂ ਹੋਈ ਆ This statement I took it very seriously. When then if we relook the whole movement from the day one, starting from 26 November to 2020 at the Shambhu border, till the last date of that movement, these forces remained very active over there, though they were not being allowed to take the center stage. Then comes the 26th January incident is there. Many more such incidents took place over there. My point here is, which I want to say is that this whole process, they tried to hijack or they tried to make that point as a central point. Whatever is happening in India, particularly making that point, it is as it used to be in the 1970s. They tried their level best. They tried to convince the people. They had a parallel, what we see is the stages over there, and they try to hijack the stage or the movement. So that's why it seems to me that this radicalization process is going on. And for that process, they got some assistance. They got some support, not from the diaspora only, but from the within also. And the very result of was that we have seen that in the elections also we had heard such issues over there. And on the other side, when one incident took place in which one of that what we see is that the projected hero of that movement got killed in an accident. The way whole situation basically was being brought into, they tried to bring into the national mainstream or in the international mainstream by saying that this has happened. And after that, this issue has been still very much there.
I'd like to come back to these details a little later, Professor Kumar. Can we just, looking at the broader picture, not in the specific details, because I'd like to go over each issue which contributes to radicalization or the processes separately, and to evaluate them, their scale separately. I'd like to ask you whether you see, in some sense, an increasing centrality of religion in the lives of the communities. Is there more and more religiosity, more and more seeking after a purity of religion, more and more clustering around identities than, let's say, 20 years ago, or within the period of the 60s or 70s, when the idea of secularism seemed to have a deeper grip on the political environment, if not the people at large?
I think that I must first, at the first instance, appreciate Ajai Sahni's effort to create this forum, and the urgency of this brainstorming becomes more pronounced as we are, as usual, caught in two limits: to act only if confronted with no choice, that is firefighting approach. And the second is carried away by the dominant fashions at the expense of being redundant to face the main challenges. Because I find, creation of this forum at this time is very, very appropriate, and I appreciate, you particularly for doing this. For instance, most of the studies, which have been undertaken in view of certain violent terrorist incidents, they mystify the latent character of violence, which keep on simmering, historically in the process, so that we just overlook. And this understanding precludes the need to understand terrorism as a part of a historical process. In other words, it is relevant to point out in the context of Punjab that violence is a result of certain social conditions and inseparable, as you rightly pointed out, from the existence and functioning of socio-religious institutions and political practice. It's very important. Now, I would like to make three positional observations, very straightforward. One, to me, terrorism is not merely a state of mind, it's a political strategy. It is not merely a question of a gun. If the system, the target of the gun, wants to forever silence the gun, it has to confront the politics and ideology of terrorism with its own. So the return of peace in Punjab does not imply that the conditions which caused violence have been moderated, subsumed, or resolved. As has been mentioned in the literature, the peace is not absence of violence, but the absence of those conditions which give birth to violence. My second positional observation on this is that the conditions or priority to the basic causes are historically evolved. Competing identities, for example, in Punjab, they range from religious identity, then fundamentalist and communal identity, and secular Punjabi identity. And if I may very quickly mention that in the first, these three identities coexist. In interaction with the development process, dominant politics, a particular identity becomes dominant and other identities are pushed to the margins. They remain there, they remain active, they remain visible, but they are pushed to the margins. For example, in partition Punjab from post-1947 phase, you find intra-religious mobilization like Punjabi Suba movement underplayed the secular Punjabi. Then you came, the second phase where mid-60s to 80s, a shift from political deprivation of the dominant group to economic discrimination. I link this with now, with this phase also. The demands raised are more in nature of financial autonomy rather than danger to the Panth. But from 1980 to 92, it degenerated from autonomy to secession. That was the third phase, which we witnessed, and it was a very explosive phase. And the fourth phase, we witnessed resurgence of democracy and secular Punjabi identity. That was since 1997 till 2017. But now, the fifth phase, for me, the importance of this brainstorming comes here. Let me hypothesize that in the contemporary phase, the decline in political and economic hegemony of the dominant religious caste identity, leading to progressive deprivation to use that as a phraseology, may provide fodder to the resurgence of Panthic politics, and in turn provide space to radical fundamentalist overtones. Because on the one hand, you see this Kisan movement, as has been mentioned, it was basically trying to destabilize the land relations in Punjab. That there is a trend of corporatization, and now politically, now the results of the election has also dislodged the dominant hegemonic Jat peasantry from the political system. So they are basically discriminated. So this I will link with the later part. The third observation, positional observation, the intra-state conflicts, I'll bring in another factor, are intermeshed with the interstate political tension, for example, with Pakistan. So how Pakistan appropriates. So this question is linked with the explosion of identities in the whole of South Asia. You have seen that Kartarpur corridor and number of such kind of tendencies that how Pakistan army is trying to make best out of this kind of situation. So I find that the Khalistan assertions, the Pakistan establishment provides teeth to these elements, which in turn create interstate tensions also. So now the point which Professor Sekhon was making, the historic, what are the triggers? And I find it's not only this present moment. As you rightly mentioned, that started sometimes in 1915, 16, and then it went on. For example, basically, to me, that historical process, in one sense, has weakened the nationality identity of Khalistan, and strengthened, sub-nationality Punjabi identity. But however, it does not imply that the formation of Khalistan and not the Khalistan identity can be overruled. Why I'm making this statement? Because in relation to political economic feasibility of a new sovereign state may not be there. For instance, at the time of formation of Pakistan, the question raised was not about feasibility, it was more of a historical accident shaped by political and socio-economic processes, which I see happening now. Similarly, the question of Khalistan must be addressed not to its feasibility, but the forces inherent in the social processes driving their life force from the practice of politics and religion, which may shape and nurture the idea of Khalistan and culture of violence. So basically, the trigger which I found, was the number of political misadventure to cultivate exclusive religious support, and the process disturbed the diversity sensibility. For instance, the violation of Sikh scriptures, the holding of a congregation of Sikhs labeled as Sabbath Khalsa, announcement of terrorists as the custodians of Sikh religious institution, namely Akal Takht and HEPC by hardliners, continue to disturb peace. And the way in which the events have unfolded indicated that they were planned and not spontaneous, politically motivated and illogically driven.
Right.
The serious issue is that the political battles are being fought in the religious domain, if I may say something, rather than on the development agrarian front or in the governance. These protests were very carefully appropriated the absence of counter narrative to Khalistan. Because here we didn't have a counter narrative to Khalistan, which was very ably appropriated. Further, the consensus in the country to ensure justice for the Sikhs butchered in 1984, anti-Sikh carnage, was extended to rehabilitate terrorists. This was interpreted as a claim by the section of militants to nurture revenge for hurt Sikh psyche for a separate Sikh state. And this was further reinforced by the eventually conceding in 2014 the twice denied appeal of Dal Khalsa for the conferment of martyrdom on the leaders of Khalistan by the Akal Takht.
Right, sir.
Organizations, after having acquired legitimacy, raised their claim to control IGPC and Akal Takht to liberate peace from the moderates and liberals. The state, on the one hand, allowed regrouping of fundamentalist groups in order to appropriate religious something consequences. On the other, an inefficient handling of violation of sanctity of Sikh religious scripture provided enough order to fringe groups to articulate their divisive agenda in the mainstream. No doubt, delay in delivery of justice to victims of violence has been used as a justification to take revenge on their own. There is a need to apply closer to tragic events, no doubt, without submitting to martyrdom psyche that one perpetrator of violence is a martyr and the other is a villain. In other words, violent acts of non-state actors be pardoned, the state actors indulging in violence be hanged, and vice versa. But closure should not mean subversion of institution of justice, for saving those who have taken life of others. The assumption that killing terrorists and punishing a few policemen will result in elimination of terrorism. There are lessons to be learned. Terrorism shall thrive if it is fought by harboring. This is precisely what is being done. For instance, in 2 incidents, men were lynched over sacrileges rather than bringing them to justice.
So may I come back to those? Those are again issues. As I said, I'd like to break this up into slightly neater sections.
Yeah, one point only I'll make. Closure for me does not mean revenge. It also does not mean to register a claim that my use of violence is privileged and therefore cannot be brought to justice. That is the crucial point I thought I should make.
Point made. Professor Sekhon, I'd like to go back to the question that I'd also asked Professor Kumar. Do you see, this is of course a question of political mobilization very substantially. It's a question of a particular kind of leadership, of a sectarian or religious leadership, call it a Panthic leadership, or at least the extremist element in a Panthic leadership. What I want to know is that as far as the mass psyche is concerned, do you see a greater orientation towards religiosity? Do you see more and more participation in religious ritual, in say, Gurdwara attendance? Even we will come to other communities subsequently. This is not only about Sikhs. This is about a growing radicalization, I think, across the board. But I'd like to talk to you about the general psyche of the masses. Does increasing religiosity does it exist? Does increasing religiosity become more and more a fact today? And does it make people more open to mobilization by a leadership that seeks to distort a religious identity?
Sir, when we talk about this specific issue, I will start that. We have many explanations of the rise of terrorist violence in the state in the 70s and the 80s. We don't have any clear-cut answer to that situations, what led to the decline of the terrorism in the state instantly or within no time over there. The simple reason is that the rejection of the people, even at that time, the very ideology of the Khalistan and very ideology of the terrorism. The reason being is that if we go by the whole narrative, if we go by the whole situation, the 15 years of the terrorist violence in the state, who suffered the most, who at one point of time were considered to be the warriors of the terrorist violence over there. So the memories are still what we see fresh in the minds of the people over there. It's not much, even just 30 years ago, this has happened. The second thing which I want to focus over here is that I do not know about what other reasons, but in the area which I live, Maja, not even a single family in this particular area who was not affected directly, indirectly by the terrorist violence or by the state's terrorism over there. So having said all these things, I'm saying that the two parallel narratives are going on. One is of the elitist narrative, that may be of political parties, that may be of the religious organizations. We have a very powerful religious organizations in the state. And we all know that how come there was a mushroom growth of the Deras and the Babas in the post-terrorism period. This is another issue which we have also done a study of the rise of the Deras and Babas, and there being an instrument in those days, instruments of helping the system to provide the information. That's a different thing. But we have also see that there is a, what we say, these Babas and Deras, very powerful, violent struggle is going on, and it was there. I have no hesitation to say, take the name of, on the one side, you have a Bindranwala, on the other side, you have a Dandriyawala. Many more are very much there. The reason being is that in the post-terrorist era or terrorism era, we are seeing that Punjab, again, I'm coming to that central point. Why all these, why people become religious? Why people go to Gurdwaras? Why people go to Deras? We have to look into this question, I think, very seriously. The agrarian crisis is very much there. It's almost hopelessness in that way also. Possibly the drug addiction in the youth may be the reason of the hopeless. I'm not going into that problem. Anybody can say that unemployment is much more in a Haryana or a UP. They aren't going up. Punjab in that way is altogether a different situation is there. So my point here is that political parties, they try their level best. We see that at one point of time, those who claim to be their guardians, Panthak parties, how people have rejected them. And marginalize them in that way also.
Absolutely, yes.
We all know that, you see, fringe elements are there. We all know that, as you rightly said, that terrorist incidents are there. Sometimes hand grenades are there. Sometimes killings of the prominent persons are there. We all know that diaspora population is active. Fringe elements are very much active there. But what I think is that people still remember that who is to suffer if that situation comes over there. The second important thing is that the role of the youth. When we talk about who were the terrorists at that time, they were in the age group of 17 to 24 or 25 years. The average age group in our study was 21. But we are witnessing for the last 15 years, the exodus of well-bodied youth to the Western countries. They're moving away from basically the scene of the Punjab in that way also. Whatever the population we had, I have no hesitation to say, is the residue population of the youth, those who could not move. We have recently done a study on the state of youth in Punjab. I think this issue came in that the youth in the state has become more religious. Possibly there are very parameters to measure it. One parameter was that how much you listen to the Gurbanis and the Sabd Kirtans. And we all know that basically there's a Kirtan in the Golden Temple morning and the evening. Even if you are not the religious, you just basically put that Kirtan on that, because music is very soothing. All music is very soothing and gives you, what we see is that you see that, and that bhajans are very, basically are there. What I want to say is that in spite of all these things, they are not getting any space in that, in the psyche of the people of the Punjab. You go and talk to anyone, they are religious in that way also. They will talk about sometime about what we are not getting, but these organizations, maybe a religious organization or the political organizations or the organization outside the basically state, outside the country, they, in spite of their best efforts, even giving the prize to host the flag, all these things were going on. But I can say this thing very confident that they are not getting response until or unless they do not get any response, positive response. I do not think there is any serious crisis or there is any serious challenge of this thing becoming what we see a reality in the state of Punjab.
Thank you. That was very, very important. And I do recall some data from the period of the age of terror, if you would like to call it that. And I remember that more than 65% of all civilian victims of terrorism were in fact Sikhs. So
more important, it's not Sikh, we further qualify, they were the Jats.
Yes, and overwhelmingly they were of the same.
Yes. Also, the number of the urban Sikhs who are involved in that situation was very, very small. The largest majority was of the Jats, and the largest majority of those who became the victims
were also Jats. Yes.
By the terrorist or by the police, or there was involuntary migration. The forced migration in the villages, they were also of the Jats in that way also. So they became the worst victim of that situation. I think
Professor Kumar, we are talking here of not only the Sikhs as such. We are seeing globally a very great rise in shall we say, extremist doctrines. To what extent do you feel this trend towards greater and greater political politics of polarization and the throwing of community against community by political leaderships almost everywhere, but very certainly and visibly in India? To what extent do you think this is a factor within Punjab that is leading, if not to anything in terms of a revival of Khalistan, of the Khalistani idea, but at least to some tension and at least to the elements in the margins who are now being attracted to this extremist ideology and activity?
I think it's a very valid point because I see this resurgence and emergence in the post 1994 phase with economic reforms processes were initiated, the liberalization, privatization, where lots of people their jobs were at stake and number of insecurities were introduced. And that is why most of the political parties attempted to blur these frustrations and which were coming into the system by infusing religiosity and ritualism in different forms, in different, situations. And it is globally. But in India, not only in Punjab, you can see that happening in different other states also, maybe Uttar Pradesh, otherwise also. So religion became a kind of a instrument to blur the emerging contradictions. The callousness of the market was, somehow provided a soothing twist towards, these religion. As if I may use, what Marx said, very interesting thing, the religion is heart of the heartless, mind of the mindless, soul of the soulless. And here, religion is here to stay in capitalism. That is what he said in the end.
Yes.
So, basically, here, when the situation becomes so much exploitative, then they have to give heavy doses of religion to remain in power, or polarize, people either on caste, or on religion, or on other primordial identities. This is happening. And what interesting point is, if I may mention in the case of Punjab, I've seen in this election, most of the leaders were visiting Hindu temples. And so those temples which I don't know even they existed in Punjab for a Punjabi Hindu. And they were visiting those temples and trying to go there, worship and invoke, some kind of Hindutva. So Punjabi Hindu is a different, he is not a Hindutva follower. He may not have seen it. If you ask him, where is Ram Janmabhoomi, he may not be even aware, which side is this. He may point towards golden temples, that this is Ram Janmabhoomi. So he is more than a Sikh, and then 25% Arya Samaji and 20% Sanatani. So he's a queer mixture of all these things. So basically I find, but this religiosity was invoked. And that is why I find the basic point which I now witness, the religiosity has increased, you very rightly pointed out, and it is very not a very positive sign, because on the one hand, when it increases, it moderates the scientific outlook and scientific interpretation and critical faculties of a person. So that is the media also plays that role, which say speed kills. We are first in the news. You kill your reflective capabilities of a person. So people start reacting. So reaction is the first symptom which leads to violence, and that comes intolerance from the religious practices. And suddenly you say the cow has been slaughtered there, and you will see many people start reacting, because the media also is fast with the news, kills your reflective faculties, and you only become reactive. So that is what is happening around. So it's not only invoking of religion, but also the speed which is killing people in different situations, and it happens in Punjab. I think it is also happening somewhere. Some of you also issued a statement, I remember, when that secularism is that it has to be given life death penalty should be introduced. Many of the intellectuals said that we shouldn't introduce this, because why you become so fundamentalist and fanatic that you have to kill people if they get this kind of, and that is why those who are killed in those incidents, I definitely see this is a acceptability of that. Nobody protested. There was not even a procession anywhere, or any liberals never said that why those people have been killed and they have not been brought to justice in the legal system. So that shows the acceptability amongst the people. They violated that, therefore they deserve this punishment. And I see as a father of religiosity provide justification to such inhuman acts which happen under the garb of religiosity or religion.
I'd like to come back both. This is a question I'd like to address to both of you, sir. First, I'll go to Professor Sekhon, and I'd go a little beyond that wonderful phrase you used, the callousness of the market. But the problem in Punjab is not just the callousness of the market. The very interesting thing is that prior to the rise of terrorism, the late 70s through the 80s into the early 1990s, Punjab was on per capita income terms, the second richest state in the country. At the end of 15 years almost of terrorism, it was still at the third position. It remained in the third position till almost year 2000. After that, it has systematically continued to plummet down to what I think the last data we have is around 2021. It is now on the 16th position in terms of per capita income. What is the degree to which misgovernance, corruption, if you please, the sheer incompetence of regime after regime has affected the people? And to what extent does this create a ferment among the population, which is going to translate into one pattern or other of disturbances or disorders? It's not just a question, will Khalistan come back? One ideology may go away, but if this degree of frustration persists, some other mobilizing ideology may come into play. So, Professor Sekhon, the element of misgovernance, the element of corruption, the element of incompetence in governance over these decades.
So, what we are witnessing is that the ruling elite, which was basically created by the Green Revolution, which we call as the legitimate children of the Green Revolution, basically they remained feudal even in the 90s or in the early 21st century in that way also. So basically it was the same class, the same caste, the same idea, and basically they could not come to what we see is the requirements of the state over there. Their agenda remained the same what was there in the pre-independence country or in the post-independence country. I think that the ruling elite, both governments, 15 years it's a Kali BJP rule, 15 years it was a Congress rule. I think they could not come out with the new ideas. And because there was no alternative in that way also, what I will say that with the weakening of the left, particularly because of the terrorist violence over there, the left almost reduced to zero in that way also.
Yes.
So the competition remained between these two political parties. And we see that very basically the structure of these two political parties in Punjab particularly, and the profile of the leaders in that way also. I think it was the leadership which failed us like anything. They could not basically think beyond that. So what should be the agenda of the state government over there? And their only purpose was to remain in a power. So they focused on the freebies, basically. They focused on the freebies. There was what we see the competitive populism, which ultimately resulted into which brought corruption was very much there. And when particularly the problem with the regional party is that when the power and the government remains with the same group, or even in case of the Khalidar, it was the same family in that way also. So my point here is that the pressure was not there. We have seen that almost the 15 years, there was no political activity in the state in that way also. Left got weakened in that situation. There was no student movement which could basically raise such issues over there. The last student election took place in Punjab in 1983. And on the other side, basically, we have seen that the violence was very much there. Institutions got demolished. The social structure institutions, education basically was ignored, health was ignored, and it was being basically added by, said that then came the issue of the liberalization, privatization, globalization, and it was made to the people that government has nothing to do in that way also. I think it was a failure on the part of the government and these basically the leaders over there, which could not visualize, in spite of the fact that our needs, our requirements changed very fast with the coming of technology. And where we can focus in that way also, because it's not possible, heavy industry was not possible. Punjab is that in a border state, we could only focus on IT. industry over there. We can only focus on that, this what is called that agro-based small industry. We could have strengthened that the cooperative system in the state over there. I think it's the misgovernance on the part of that. And the second was that the weakening of the pressure from the below. When I use the word pressure from the below, basically pressure from the people for their demands, because of, I still think that those 15 years of the violence on the terrorism, and later on it was basically the beginning of this liberalization, privatization, globalization, created such what we see is that the situation in the state which confused the masses on the one side, but ultimately gave a very broad space to these ruling elite to loot the state, or to do whatever was basically concerned to their interest or the interest of the people, those who are power over there. I think it was this leadership, though that's why it has been manifested in this election after 30 years, when people had said that we have given 15-year each political party over there, they failed us. Punjab went down, not because Punjab doesn't have the resources. We have everything. We have a high quality land. We have a water is there. People are very hardworking people are there. They are ready to basically do any job in that way also. So basically they blame. That's why this is the situation. And this is
a question of governance more than anything else.
Particularly yes. Of the Akali Dal. Basically, even today, in the few days ago, when the election was going on, when we are asking this, the people over there, Amrinder Singh government, the Congress government has not done nothing, but they're not ready to forgive the Akali Dal. But they think that it was the Akali government which is responsible for all the problems which we are facing. Congress has just continued that problem. So my point here is that, so that's why Punjab could not move in that way. That started going down and down and down. Populism was there, freebies was there, no investment came from the outside, which was not to come, because whatever the industry we had, it just moved out during the terrorism.
Absolutely.
And you have the neighboring states, hill states are there, they were given the priority, and whatever the industry, small industry, industry was there, it was shifted to that. So only agriculture, how long we can survive on the agriculture, when we have 85% of the total farmers have less than 5 acres of the land. So ultimately expectations remained there. Capacity, capability of the people could not be either sustained or could not be strengthened. I think that created a mess which we are witnessing today.
Professor Kumar, I'm more or less going to ask you to address the same question, but I'd like to add another layer here. Much of what we say about misgovernance, corruption, mismanagement, incompetence applies to, if not all, then most of the other Indian states. What is the difference in the unique dynamic in Punjab? Does this have a different impact here? Does it somehow or the other roil in a different direction? Or can we say, well, this is something that is happening everywhere, it is also happening here, and carry on with life?
Yeah, but I'll just on a lighter vein. Now there is no Akali Dal, they are decimated. So we are in the golden age. I mean, we are now, I think, we are for a brighter future and things will improve. I will not go to such a simplistic analysis. I'll tell you three basic facts. One, Punjab has the least poverty in the country.
Yes, it is a very equitable state. That is still...
Because land reforms to a large extent in Kashmir and Punjab and Kerala. These are the three states where the land reforms were implemented, which means relatively the income was spread to the small marginal farmers and others also. These were the studies which were done, by Alag and Wallas during those times. And one could understand that was happening. So that is why you find the poverty level low. But the paradox emerged that the poverty level amongst the Dalits was 3 times higher than a poverty level amongst the non-Dalits in Punjab. So that's another paradox. That one can look into that. The second paradox which emerged, that because there was an island model of development which was introduced in the country in the post-independence phase, Punjab was basically the agriculture was developed because it was the canal colonies. From there they had the experience of that, and then the agriculture was developed. And with green evolution, the productivity level today also, Punjab has the highest agriculture productivity. If I say that, even in the world, we have highest productivity level. Even during terrorism, productivity didn't go down.
Did not fall, yes.
In agriculture. So that's my second submission. My third submission is the whole conceptualization of Punjab, that you want industry. Punjab has in the recent, from 2008-9 onwards, you have the best educational institutions in Punjab. You have IIM, you have ISER, you have ISB, you have IITs, you have all these institutions. But where the problem lies? The problem lies that we needed a decentralized industrialization model. We didn't need the big industry because capital flows where profit is. And here land is so expensive, it was put to use in agriculture. No industries would like to buy land, expensive land. They will go to Madhya Pradesh or UP. It was not a flight of industry because anybody who can make profit in Punjab will definitely come. I remember in Gujarat, maximum trade union movement, very strong movement was in Gujarat, and there used to be violence and people used to go and invest there because it gives you profit. The land was cheaper, the labor was cheap. Here, you get labor for agriculture from other states. So you cannot have big industries here. So it was a wrong, and also I analyzed the Vidhan Sabha debates for the last, starting with mid-60s till 2014. Very only, few hours were devoted to bring in industry, that how to bring industry. Everybody was talking about MSP, everybody was talking about agriculture, because it was ruled by agriculture elite. For the last 60 years, Punjab was ruled by agriculture elite. And this agriculture elite, they were all on the farmer movement. Even the IS officer, everyone was protesting and belong with the farmers. So this elite was seeing, and they made the policies. They could have easily done agro-based industry. They could have easily built forward and backward linkages of these things. They didn't do it. Now the question is, once the marketization happened, your crop, now from the buyer's market, from the seller market, you went to the buyer market.
Yes.
Now they dictate what kind of thing they want. The surplus is, because you get 80,000 crores of MSP every year. And this is the backbone of Punjab economy. Now you don't want to lose it. And that is why you are protesting that we will not allow the next form of agriculture to happen, because Punjab needs paradigm shift. The paradigm shift at 3 levels. One, a good quality human resource development. Second, was basically dealing with the decentralized model of industrialization, because Punjab has a preponderance of small scale industry in Punjab. It's a huge, you have Mandi Gobindgarh, you have Jalandhar, you have Batala, all small scale, you have Amritsar. But that industry, nobody paid any attention to give technology support, skill support to these industries. So they were not, giving any such kind of support. So, but my basic point is, if you want to diversify from agriculture, the model, this agriculture elite, which ruled Punjab for the last 60 years in all the parties, not Akali, Congress,
yes,
everyone.
Yes, it is the same families, in fact.
Everyone. What they did was that the crop diversification. You can't diversify crop without diversifying the economy. It's a basic principle of economics. You can't do that. If I started growing quinoas, then you produce surplus quinoa and there is no one to process it, then there's rot on the roads. How can you do that? But you put up plants. I remember Volta's plant was put up in a bore. But when I went there, the quinoas are rotting outside. I asked them, why you are not buying from here? No, we are buying from Gujarat because they are good quality and they're cheaper. Capitalists will have there to earn profit. They are not earned to help farmers or not to help locals. They didn't understand because they were functioning in command economy. You wanted, that whole psyche was that there is something, in command economy, you are here to buy the surplus, you give us the money, we want to live. But no, they didn't make any effort to integrate themselves as Reddy's in Andhra did, as Kammas in Andhra they did. They got integrated to the next level of development. That is industry. They only went into the transport. They started calling them the transport mafia. They are real estate. They didn't have any skills. Either they buy land or they go to transport, buy 2 trucks or 1 bus. They started doing that. The surplus flowed into these things. So agriculture surplus, along with the agriculturist, didn't go into the industry and trade. Our submission, I remember with Vijay Kelkar, if you may be listening this debate, in 1984, both of us were thinking of preparing a paper that how to ancillarize Punjab. The first generation Kisan can be given ancillaries. For example, if somebody is making a television, he can make channel of television. And under different roofs, these products are made and then they are assembled in one roof. Tata may assemble the television. So then they will get integrated to the national market, and they will also get, not to compete in the market so openly. So that model, the Papadwadi industry in Amritsar, to be on a lighter vein, the Lijjat Papad have a turnover of maybe 300 or 400 crores. This Amritsari Papad, nobody, thought of making it a cooperative in a corporate mode. And then Amritsar will become a golden city. So these papad will sell in Yuba city or in US, everywhere. We didn't do that. So basically, I think that it is a wrong policies which were conceived, but this agrarian elite, which never thought of building linkages with trade and industry. But on the per capita income, I basically of the view that GDP growth, which Amit San also mentioned, is a wrong measure.
Absolutely, yes.
When it comes, for example, well-being, people's well-being. In Punjab, you don't have any kacha house of Dalits. You have very good road network. You have link roads which were built because of transport, the food, wheat, to the from the villages to the cities. So you have such a huge network. Who built it? Maybe Caro built it, or maybe later on, other leadership, they did do work. It is just like Modi ji saying that 70 years, nothing happened.
Yes.
A very good proposition to
Sir,
say. But basically, I would like to submit, let's not brush Punjab as if Punjab has remained on the backwaters. I think Punjab has all the resources, doing very well as compared to other states. The only thing is they need paradigm shift. There is a stagnation in agriculture. Industry is not, getting linked with the agriculture. Human resource is not developing to the level it should be developed. So these are the situation which, as rightly said, all other states are facing, but we are a little more critical. Punjabis are very critical of themselves.
Yes. Also, you have higher expectations. You don't. You are not like UPI. It's कि roti mil gayi to काफी है.
I think these are the aspiration levels also.
Yes.
Somehow there is a gap in that. So I basically think Punjab has a potential, and there has to be a policy framework which can integrate paradigm shift, because it's not. It has reached at a particular level. Now other states may be down. For example, Madhya Pradesh is producing wheat. Why you buy wheat from them? Why you allowed them to produce wheat? They could have easily grown other commercial
into other crops. Yes.
And Punjab now you say, no, you grow other crops, we'll buy from there. What is this policy? So it is wrong policies, even of the central government and also of the state government, which was ruled by the agrarian elite and which says now they are deprived.
We have very little time left now, sir. And I've got a lot of questions. I also had many other issues that I wanted to raise, but many of them are raised in the questions themselves. So I'll come to you, Professor Sekhon. The role of the diaspora communities. Gurbani Bhutani over here sends me a question. He says, what is the impact of SFJ, Sikhs for Justice propaganda on the ground? So can we look at the role of the diaspora? But briefly, sir, because we only have another 10, 12 minutes left. I would like to...
Sir, it's not a question. Basically, SDF is in that way is a non-entity when we see it from all counts. He belongs to a village very close to Amritsar. The point for me is, which I think is going to be a serious concern, is that because of this economic crisis and all other things, the youth has started moving outside the state, particularly in Canada, America, or in Australia. And what we have witnessed that how active they were in the peasants' organizations under different banners over there. This is one point which I think we have to see in the times to come, how they are responding to the situation. They are not very much in that way of what we see the ingrained, what is happening over here. They are not that much mature in that way also. We all have seen the major jalous and demonstrations and so on and so forth. The second thing is, sir, that in 2021 census, what will be the outcome of the Hindu Sikh population over here? Because we all know that Punjab is, rightly said, that one of the 12 states, and actually the population decadal growth is going to come. And this is very sensitive issue in that way also. Particularly, it will come handy in the hands of those people who are always there to make it an issue in the times to come. I think that until or unless we don't have a fertile ground over here, outside forces cannot do much damage to the situation. We have some serious issue, particularly, say, for example, the Beabdi issue, the secularized issue, which remained unresolved. Either it was blown out of proportion. I will not basically focus on that way also, but still it remained very sentiment on the part of the Sikh population. And such incidents is a part of a misgovernance. Such incident which we can consider as a law and order issue at one point of time, or not taking action immediately or punishing the culprit, or maybe it may be a political, what we say, adventure in that way also. When these issues are not resolved, these just get linger on. And we have seen that this incident took place in 2015, and it was very much violent even in today. And particularly, we have seen that whatever the later space, particularly this radical people, including the leader of this Simarjit Singh Mahan, was almost redundant. But how come that he was a runner-up in an election recently over there? So my point here is that all these elements are there in the air. All these things are very much there, but they won't be able to get ground until or unless people get receptive. What I am witnessing is that the situation has altogether changed. It's not the 70s, it's not the 80s. We are living in a second decade of the 21st century. That gives us a hope in that way also. People have become more pragmatic. One thing I would like to share with you, sir, because in that study, what we have witnessed that the largest majority of the Sikhs thought that our religion is much more safe in the hand of the Aam Aadmi Party. This is a question we asked the people over there. On the other side, the Hindu population preferred the Congress, not the BJP. It was the BJP which got the least support from the Hindu community, and it was the Akali which got the least support from the Sikh community. If we basically understand this whole situation, the dynamic of the people's response to the situation or the issues which we are discussing here, which are in the air, which are here and there, that gives us a very clear message. Until or unless there is a serious manipulation on the part of the leads, basically it's not possible for me that they will get some foothold over there. Yes, of course, small incidents, skirmishes may be there, but ultimately state must respond to the people, not to their aspiration level, but they're there. What we see is that the issues which they face in their day-to-day life, particularly on the governance aspect.
Thank you. I have a very question I think that you will enjoy, Professor Pramod Kumar. It's Pankaj Sain. He says the new government in Punjab seems proactive towards its measures on the eradication of narcotics and terrorism. Since these issues were focused on by the previous government as well, what has caused the failure of these policies earlier? And does the current government have a better perspective on these?
I think the current government has a perspective because in Delhi, they have already eradicated drug addiction from the colleges and from various hostels in amongst the youth also. So they have experience there. Now, Delhi is, free from drug. Nobody takes drug. There are no drugs, in the colleges, no drugs, in anywhere. So I think they have experience and they will apply that experience to Punjab. And we are very hopeful they will succeed. Because drug addiction is only that you take the drug just like that. It's not that. Drug addiction is a different kind of a problem. It's not that. First, I will not go into the detail. The only point I am trying to make is that drug addiction and the drug trade, which start from Afghanistan, goes up to Los Angeles, pass through Punjab, it's a golden triangle. And then there is a synthetic drugs, which come from
enormously, yes.
They are another ball game. So basically, we are, in Punjab, we do see that youth is taken to drugs, and migration of youth abroad started in 1875. So Punjabi society is very adventurous. The youth have been migrating, to the world. Now this government says that we don't allow people to go to Canada. Why? Not allow, youth to explore the world. The only thing they can do is educate the youth, build their capacities. So if they go venture out, they can get gainfully employed. So that should be the attitude, rather than saying now nobody will go there and here we'll create situation, it will become Canada itself. Subir Badal used to say that I'll make Los Angeles here. So they want to make this Canada. We are very much familiar with these kind of rhetorics. But anyhow, I'm very hopeful because Professor Sekhon is there. He is so enthusiastic, he's a close friend. So I don't want to dishearten him at this stage, in the early stage of this government. So I'm along with him. So the other point in which I basically think, the drug problem and also the problem of youth unemployment. The unemployment, this party has taken a very interesting position. I used to watch TV, their ad. कि जॉब देने वाले बनो, जॉब लेने वाले नहीं। वेरी गुड, अब तो सब जॉब देंगे पंजाब में, एंटरप्रेन्योर बन जाएंगे, लोगों को जॉब देंगे। तो ये दिस वाज द मेन क्लिप, आई मीन, व्हिच यूज्ड टू कम। एंड नाउ if Sekhon's, I mean, survey is true, the Hindu sees Aam Aadmi Party custodian of religion, Sikh see Aam Aadmi Party custodian of religion. So now we have a very composite religious cultural unit to be the custodian of all the religions. So this is what exactly one wanted to do. So it has come now. So it can defend Hindus, it can defend Sikhs. I mean, the secularities which happened was also of the Bhagavad Gita, was also torn along with, I mean, Guru Granth Sahib Ji. Also, I mean, Quran, and also, I mean, the Bible. But nobody inquired into those issues, and nobody made an issue that it is basically all the religious, I mean, scriptures are getting, I mean, this kind of violation. No inquiry committee, I mean, also went into the details of how come it happened that Gita was also torn on the same day, and also the Quran, and also, I mean, Christian, and also, I mean, Guru Granth Sahib Ji. So it happened with all religion. But somehow the dominant discourse was only of one. And that I also find somewhere appropriating the religious sentiments of one section of society, rather than dealing with this problem as a problem which may be because of designs of the Pakistan or design of other individuals that's trying to violate all the religion scriptures, so that people become, there is unrest, I mean, they start fighting with each other. That may be their design of ISI. So rather than, I mean, looking only, I mean, towards that this so-and-so has done it, so I think that this has to have a larger context, through which we should see the whole process which is developing in Punjab.
Thank you. I have two related questions, Professor Sekhon. I think in some sense you have answered them earlier, but they are pointed, so I think I'd like you to look at them a little more closely. Jyoti asks, which particular areas of Punjab are getting radicalized more? Of course, you have indicated that there is no larger trend, but to the extent that we have some measure of radicalization, where is it mostly geographically concentrated? And Manisha asks, do you agree that there is a vital need to carry on a de-radicalization campaign for youth in Punjab on an immediate basis? I think they're related questions. They articulate the anxieties people outside Punjab feel. If you could kindly...
One thing I want to add with this, what Professor Pramod has said, I think we all have the problem with that most of the political leaders, along with the very active academia, they disconnect with the masses over there for the last many years. The reason is very clear. We know that all villages, this process of selling of the drug was going on. I have my own personal experience of my own village. Everybody knows that who is selling that. Everybody knows that which haldar or a thanedar comes to that place. Everybody knows that how much money goes to even the elected representative, respected elected representative of that area. Well-built network is there. They don't basically blame openly, because they know that in case they go for complaint, they have to face the consequences. If this government has that will in that way, people are ready. This time, I think they are fed up. We may agree, we may disagree with that. What was their response? I think the response in this election was written very clearly on the wall, which failed many people about all these things in that way also. So my point here is that once people, at one point of time, we are being even told, even by Honorable this Ravira Saab told when he became the Director General of the Police, that the terrorism, the people of the Punjab must learn to live in the terrorism in the days to come. Once it comes, it remains there, but we all know that what happened to the terrorism over here. This is the problem created by what we see, that all of us, in the sense that people like me could not basically complain to the police when I see that it was going on just in front of my house over there. So my point here is, this is not an issue in that way also. There was a complete network was there. Even sometimes if anybody wants to leave that profession, please use to force that person, why you have left this job. You do this for us. Yes. You may agree, you may disagree with that. That was the reality which we have experienced in that way also. Second point that, as you have said, radicalization now is an era of information and technology. Any part of the state, any part of the world, this process can go in that way also. Role of the social media is very much there. And we use disinformation campaign, propaganda, things which never happened, you can put before the people that this has happened in that way also. Very fact is there that religion is not only, now roti roji is also more important than what we see, that this part is very much there. But what we are witnessing, that this, it has still space in the sense that where all these, basically what we see, misguided youth is there. The only way to remove is that you give them good education, you engage people. I'm not saying that employment is, people of Punjab, they are not, what I think is that we are not beggar in that way also. The people of Punjab basically help other, only they want our identity not in the negative sense, our pride should be restored. Our respect should be restored. We should be given space in there. The concept of Kar Seva is very, very, what we see,
very important
among the people of the Punjab over there. Only thing is that the system must have a connect with the masses. All other basically stakeholders, which basically are thriving or having livelihood on the sources of the society, they must connect not by other means, but themselves. My personal experience is that whenever we talk to the people, even the students in the class do not listen to us properly. Once we go to the people, once we basically discuss things with them, they are so attentive, they listen to us, it provides them a soothing atmosphere. Possibly this was the reason these Babas and Deras, because they would understand the psyche of the people to make them their followers. I think there's a need, concrete effort on the part of all stakeholders, not only the government, we all, that we argue with the people. As that day we said that we don't have the dialogue. Now, there's no tradition of the dialogue. Once we're involved with the people, everybody knows that what is the economic situation of the Punjab. They know there is not a magic wand over there. They know Punjab is indebtedness is there. All these things are there. They know that all issues are there. But only thing is that just to involve them in that the decision-making process, involve them in taking that opinion. That's why I said one thing. Particularly, I do not know whether it's a part of that. While electing these 5 representatives from the Punjab, the people of the Punjab would have been asked, given 10, 12 hours to give their, basically what we see, their opinion, that there would have not that much of what we see, witnessing, what we are hearing, that the people are saying that we are being, we have been basically let down by our this ruling dispensation over there. I think people are ready. Only other part should respond to their, basically what we see is that involve them into the all process which is going on. So that's why we will be very safe, and there is no space for minor incident will be there. But we can say it at present, there will be no repetition of what has happened earlier in the 80s or in the early 90s.
Thank you so very much, sir. We've run more, in fact, we've run beyond our time. I still have a whole lot of questions over here. This has been a very interesting discussion, but I think we have to sort of wind up at this stage. It's been very, very interesting, and I think we need to continue this discourse. I don't think we've come anywhere close to really exhausting not only the subject, but also the tremendous wisdom both of you bring and experience both of you bring to the subject. So hopefully we will get back to this or related issues soon. And thank you so very much, Professor Sekhon. Thank you so very much, Professor Pramod.